another episode of Inside the Lab. I'm Krishna Sharma and we're here with Alpesh Doshi, consultant embryologist at IVF London. Hi Alpesh, how are you today?
Hi Krishna, I'm very well, thank you.
So today we're going to be talking about the Embryoscope and what information it provides to embryologists in selecting the best embryos. So what do embryologists look for? What kind of criteria do they look for when selecting embryos for implantation?
So that's a very good question, Krishna. Traditionally, as embryologists, we are trained to look at the embryos daily. Once a day, when we look at what exactly they're doing after the stage of egg collection. So once eggs are collected, they're inseminated with the sperm. Then the next day we come and check how many are fertilized. Then it's a day-by-day assessment for up to 5 to 6 days to look at the pattern of development of the embryo. So embryologists are trained to be looking at these embryos daily, looking at the number of cells there are in the embryo and the amount of fragmentation that makes the embryo a good quality embryo, average quality embryo, or a poor quality embryo.
And so what information does an embryoscope provide?
So an embryoscope is an incubator which is equipped with a camera. So when, as I said, when we inject the eggs, we would put them straight into the embryoscope, which is a culture incubator, so it keeps the embryos culturing for about a period of 5 to 6 days. And daily, the embryos will be checked. And not just daily, their embryos are checked every 15 minutes per se. So the camera in the embryoscope takes an image of every embryo for that patient every 15 minutes. And at the end, it reels a beautiful video of all the time points that that embryo has undergone in terms of division. And the amount of information that embryologists get is amazing, and there's a lot of information which enables the embryologist to make a very fine-tuned decision about which embryos to select or deselect for embryo transfer.
So you're talking about the information that an embryoscope provides. What precisely do you look for in an embryo using an embryoscope that's not available to you otherwise?
Sure, that's a very good question. So in the traditional culturing systems, you take the dish once out of the incubator, and of course this is one of the disadvantages of using traditional culture, whereby you have to take the dish out of the incubator and subject it to external conditions to score the embryos. In the embryoscope, you don't have to do that because the embryos are in what we call a continuous culture under constantly favorable conditions. However, all the grading is done because you have all the information being provided to you by the camera or the images that the camera takes. Now, the information that we get is, as an embryologist, for example, when the embryo develops from 1 cell to 2 cells, 2 cells to 4 cells, 4 to 8. Now, sometimes we know that embryos do very weird things, and that classifies their potential, whether they're capable of implanting or not. So we have a lot of research that has been done in this direction, and a lot of embryos have got data in terms of which embryos are capable of implanting and which ones aren't capable of implanting. So typically, as an example, I can tell you when an embryo divides from 1 cell directly to 3 cells, this is a bad thing.
That's instead of the 1 to 2 to 4?
Correct. When an embryo develops from 2 cells to 5 cells, again, that's a bad thing. There's a set amount of divisions that an embryo is expected to make. And when it bypasses those division patterns, that's the information the embryologist gets with the embryoscope, which would not be available in traditional scoring systems.
It's very interesting. And who would you recommend using an embryoscope for? Which kind of embryos from which?
So in theory, anyone can use the embryoscope because it's not meant for a particular category of patients. The whole idea of using the embryoscope is A, the amount of information it gives us in terms of the different time points, but most importantly, it's continuous culture without interrupting the culture per se. But there are some studies that have shown that some categories of patients favorably benefit with the extra information that the embryoscope gives. Patients with repeated miscarriages, patients who are much older, over 40, and thirdly, patients with repeated implantation failure. And most importantly, there is a recent study that was presented at an American conference that showed that the embryoscope the algorithms within the embryoscope may be able to predict which embryos are going to miscarry, and that's very powerful information.
It's very exciting for
Absolutely.
the future of embryology.
It is.
Well, I think that's it for today. Thank you so much, Alpesh. If you have any other questions,
please reach out on info@ivflondon.co.uk or connect with us through our social media platforms. Thank you.